Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So glad to have you here. I'm Dr. Margot Jacot. I am your mental health business mentor, and this podcast exists for you, a practice owner, whether you're a practice of one or of 100, to figure out how do you want your practice to function? What's important to you to make your business work? Today, we're going to be talking to Kam Knight, and I'll tell you about Kam in just a moment. Today, we're really focusing on resistance. And if you think, well, I don't think I struggle with resistance, let's just do the interview. Stick with us and let's see if this applies to you. So, let me tell you about our guest for today. Kam Knight is a coach, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, emotional, and physical performance, so very well qualified. He's known for bringing fresh solutions and insights that are a rare departure from traditional ideas, which I love. I'm always looking for new ways of thinking about things that aren't just so easy to come by. Because of his fresh perspective, his books have become the gold standard for their respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. When he's not coaching or writing, he's traveling, having traveled to over 100 countries around the world. How wonderful is that in terms of just experience and needing to get past your own resistance about
Yeah.
being out there? Kam Knight, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Marco. I'm really happy to be here. And yes, I am an author of a dozen books, many of which you can see behind me.
I can. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's great. Yeah. Tell us a bit about you, Pam. I read
So,
your bio, but I think you have an interesting backstory that helps inform your work. So tell us about you.
yeah. So for most of my life, I was a fairly driven individual. And what I tell people is kind of hard not to be living in this culture, in this time where there's so much personal development content, and everyone's always telling you to do more and be your best self and reach for the stars. And as a result, I've always wanted to do more and have more and be more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, in a lot of ways, I felt like I either missed the mark or fell short, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I
Mm,
always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it? And at the time, there were really no clear answers. The best answers I came across related to having positive beliefs or not having limiting beliefs. And I think that's a part of the equation, but it's not as big as it was made to seem. In fact, I
mm,
feel like it's just a piece of a much bigger puzzle.
mm,
And over the last 15 to 20 years, more or less, that question lingered in my mind. Every time I was stuck, I was wondering why. Why can't I do this thing? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, as well as the inner work, I was learning a lot about why something would hold us back, or what if we don't do this, or if we don't get a handle on that, it'll get in our way. And unknown to me, my unconscious was processing that. And at a certain point, I had this epiphany, and I was like, wait a minute. There's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
mm. Oh, that's wonderful. No matter how much we want to do it. And I love that. I think we can all relate to that imagery of kind of
Yeah,
running into that brick wall. And folks, if you are a practice owner or you lead teams in some way, I'm sure you can relate to this idea of there's this thing I want to do. I can't quite get myself to do it. And for some of you, it might be doing your clinical notes, right? We know we need to do our clinical
yeah,
notes. We find that there is resistance or our staff has resistance. And we say, look, you can't keep your health insurance because it's a regulatory issue. I can't give you health insurance if you aren't working full time, if you're not seeing
yeah,
the right number of clients, if you're not doing your notes. And we run into either our own resistance or our staff's resistance. So
yeah,
this feels really very timely and an important topic for
yeah,
mental health professionals and practice owners. We're not even talking about our clients. I'm used to coming up against clients' resistance, and we have
Yeah.
years to work on things. Very different when we have a staff member or even in ourselves. We want to move the needle and we've got to get moving.
Yeah.
So, how do you think about resistance in terms of, our context, because we're mental health
Yeah.
professionals primarily? How does that internal resistance affect all these important practice tasks? We've got marketing,
Yeah.
networking, implementing systems. How does that show up and why and what do you do?
Yeah. So to understand resistance specifically for your audience, it really helps to understand what's playing out really in general. So what I realize is that the part of the brain that creates wants works separately from the part that actually allows us to act on the want. Now, this is really key. So I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates desires works independent of the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants, and in many ways, it's unrestrained. It's creating endless wants, one after another, at a pace faster than any one of us can achieve. And so this part of the brain was never meant to check to see if a want was worth pursuing or going after. Its only job is to create wants. And like I said, in many ways, it's unrestrained. So it's kind of, in a way, out of control. And then we have this other part of the brain, which I call resistance. It's the part that checks to see if the want is worth going after or pursuing. And if this part doesn't give the green light, we cannot act. So, what's really important to understand here is that the brain can both create a desire for something and at the same time hold us back from it. So, if we've ever experienced moments where we kind of want to do this thing, but we can't, we want to do this other thing, and it can feel like there's something wrong with us or that we don't have what it takes. And that's not the reality of the situation. The reality is that we have a part of ourselves that's built to hold us back, and it's really good at holding us back. And how this plays out is anytime a desire stands before us, that desire gets evaluated by resistance using a whole host of criteria. And if resistance, like I said, doesn't give the green light, we can't act. And so it really helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision or desire we have must go through them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it won't pass. And so, really, to work through our resistance, it helps to understand what the checklist is. What is the criteria is the mind evaluating? And they include all sorts of things like our beliefs, our habits, our comfort zones, our self image, our identity, even things like demographics. And all of that is playing into every decision that we're making. So oftentimes when we're not able to do something, it's not because we're lazy or don't have what it takes. It's because there's this criteria that we're hitting up against. Hope that makes sense.
That does make sense. So let's take, for example, this common one. Mental health practice owners do
Yeah.
not love marketing, most of us.
Yes.
Can feel kind of sleazy. It takes time. I don't really know what to do. Google ads are expensive. Where do I start? Do I have a social media campaign? I don't want to throw spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks.
Yeah.
There can be all kinds of things, but I know it would help my practice. It would help me get more clients. It would help me move the needle. I just can't get myself to do it. So what is my board of directors potentially looking at there? Like,
Yeah.
part of me that says, go, do, it's important. What might this other board of directors be saying?
Yeah. So a part of our wanting mechanism is saying, okay, I want to grow my practice. I want to take my practice to the next level or want to succeed in this area, right? And the resistance is preventing us from doing the things to go after it. So, what could be going on? Well, the first thing, as I alluded to, is belief. If we don't believe something is possible, of course, the brain is going to keep us from going after it. So,
Mm.
there might be a belief that they have that this stuff is not going to work. And so they know what they need to do, but deep down they believe it's not going to work. So, or resistance believes it doesn't work. So it puts a brakes in their lives. And beliefs go beyond that because it's not just about what they think is possible, but what they think is possible for them. Because they could see it working for others, maybe their colleagues, or they have consultants telling them this is going to work, but they don't believe it's possible for them. And if they don't, and some of these beliefs about ourselves are ones we don't really recognize. They're kind of really deep down, and we don't even notice that they're there. And then it goes even one level beyond that because we could think something's possible, but then, and we can think it's possible for us, but if we have a really deep down feelings of undeserving or that we're not good enough, that
Mm,
will also keep us from going after it. But
mm,
that's just one criteria. Another criteria could be comfort zone. How I define comfort zone is a comfort zone is a zone of comfort and knowing. And in a lot of ways, our comfort zone is about familiarity more than something that is comfortable. Because most of the time, our comfort zone is annoying and painful, but we stay in it because we know what to do and we know to do it. And there isn't a lot of mental strain to learn something new and different. And I
mm,
truly believe our comfort zones comes down to learning because learning puts a lot of, like I said, strain on the brain to
mm,
learn something new, to remember and recall it, and then to do it wrong until you get it right. So
mm,
when we are learning marketing, there's going to be some learning curve there. We're going to need to do things wrong and all of that. And that could just be too much strain for the brain where it just creates resistance.
mm,
Although the desire is there, although we can see if we do these things, it'll get us to the desire. For part of the brain, it's like, oh, this is going to be too much strain and I don't want to do it. So
mm,
that could be something else that's playing out. But then our resistance can kind of go even deeper than that. It can go into things like our self image. And I'll just give a quick example of what I'm talking about. So a lot of people have created a self-image for themselves that they're cool, they're studious, or they're successful. And they want to hold on to that self-image. And trying something new and different could confront that self-image because if it doesn't go well, we have to face the fact we're not this great self-image we created for ourselves. So oftentimes resistance will keep us from doing something so we can hold on to the self image instead of the possibility of us proving it wrong. And in my work, I found there's dozens of criteria the brain evaluates, but just in the interest of time, so your audience can understand, these are the things that they're hitting up against when they want to do something and are not able to.
mm. That's wonderful. Right. Then basically, our resistance, from what you're saying, it is obviously brain-based.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that we're broken, bad, or wrong. It's a natural, normal process that happens within people. We have an internal board of directors that's evaluating this thing that we think we want, but it's
Yes.
coming up against other kinds of beliefs about ourselves.
Yeah.
And can we succeed? Will this work? How is it going to change or not how I think about myself? It's protective. We don't want to fail.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's part of resistance's job. And
Yeah.
is resistance and avoidance in your mind, are they kind of twins? Are they cousins? Are they neighbors?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. It's a similar question that I get when people ask me, when I tell people I talk about resistance, and then they'll go, is it because of fear? And I say, fear is a manifestation of resistance. So it's easy to assume that when you feel fear, that that's the cause of you not being able to move forward. But it's usually because the board of directors have decided we're not going to do this thing, and it triggers fear to keep you from doing it.
Mm,
And the same light, avoidance is a manifestation of resistance.
mhm.
And this would be a really good time to introduce a concept I call the tricks of resistance.
Okay.
Because when resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us it's stopping us. It doesn't say, hey, Margot, you know that thing that you want to do? Well, it's not in line with our beliefs, so I can't let you do it. Or that goal of yours, well, it goes against, it might threaten our self image, so we're just going to sit here and do nothing. That's not what happens. Resistance manifests other ways. And the way it manifests is through what I call tricks. And our resistance has all sorts of tricks up its sleeves to keep us from doing things. And some of the tricks are obvious, like watching television, scrolling through social media, playing video games, maybe even drinking a little too much. And I say it's obvious because when we're doing those things, we know we should be doing something different. We should be working on the task, activity, goal, or in this case, working on our practice. But then these tricks can be quite devious, where one of them is over planning, where a person gets into a heightened sense of planning all the things they can do, how to do it, the best way to do it. And the reason I say it's a trick is because if we spend all our time planning and then not actually taking action, then the tricks win in keeping us from moving forward.
We'll just plan and plan and plan and plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people do that,
Mhm.
especially entrepreneurs. And
Mm,
then we can also go into a really intense sense of perfectionism where we
mhm.
want to make sure everything is perfect, all our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, and all of that. And all the time we spend on perfecting is time we're not putting our using to put ourselves out there. So again, the tricks win. And these tricks can go pretty deep. In fact, I will say anything that we're doing that's not moving the needle forward in our business, in our practice, or in our goal is a trick. And so avoidance is just a trick of resistance. So when we're avoiding, resistance has decided we're not going to do this thing, we're not going to move forward with this decision. And the way it's manifesting for some people is by avoiding that decision.
Mm, I love that. That's great. So there are probably several tricks that the brain
Yeah,
plays and that resistance plays. So how can people begin to work with their resistance? Have self-compassion for starters, right? I mean,
yeah,
once we get negative on ourselves and self-critical, then we have to defend ourselves against ourselves and we don't want to think about it. But if we have
yeah,
self-compassion, how can we begin to work through some of these resistances and overcome the tricks that our mind wants to play on us?
yeah. Very good question. And it's really in two questions, and I'll address the self compassion part and then how to kind of move forward. So,
Great.
self compassion is very important with this work because it's important to understand that when we are not able to do something that we have decided that we want to do, that we think is going to be beneficial to do, or that we know we should be doing, oftentimes we can feel like a failure, that there's something wrong with us, that we don't have the discipline or what it takes. But that's not the case. The reality is, we just have the part of our brain that is designed to hold us back. And like I said, it's really good at holding us back. And so it helps to have compassion when we aren't able to move forward, that it's not something deficient in us. It's just that there's a part of us that is really good at putting the brakes on this decision. So that's where the compassion piece comes in. Though we do have to be cautious of compassion because compassion can become a trick of resistance. Be-
Interesting, Cam.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
yeah, because if we fall back too much on compassion, then it's an excuse for not doing things or not moving forward and not becoming more disciplined. It's
Mhm.
like when we don't hit the mark or we're not able to do what we said we would, it's good to have compassion. But if we keep just saying, compassion and giving ourselves grace, then we're not going to move forward at all. And I'll give a really good example. So last year, I was doing coaching with one of my favorite coaches, Sarah Leslie, and she was having a lot of pop up workshops. And because I enjoy working with her, I would attend a lot of them. And there was another guy that would attend all her workshops too. And if you compared our results, you would see that my results were far higher than his. In fact, he wasn't even, gaining any results from all the time he was putting in and the advice he was getting. And he would always talk about, giving myself grace or compassion. And I
Mm,
think he used it too much where he wasn't making any progress.
mhm.
And so I think compassion is very important. It is going to help us move through the negative feelings that the brain can release when, like I said, we don't hit the mark or not able to do what we want. But if we continue falling back on it, it can become the tricks that keep us from actually moving forward. So
Mm.
that's a compassion piece. So how can a person really move forward with their resistance? So the human mind and body are extremely complex. It's like the pinnacle of complexity in the known universe. And there's a lot of causes of resistance as we're learning. So it really helps to pinpoint what the cause is. And unfortunately, trying to think through what it is isn't always the best because we might not get the accurate answer. It's best to actually have our unconscious tell us why it's holding us back. And there's a very simple and direct way to do that, and that's with self talk. For those who don't know, self talk are statements that you say or repeat to yourself of the changes you want to have or have happen. For example, if a person wants to improve their health, they might repeat statements like, I am healthy and fit. I eat well and exercise regularly. Or if a person wants to improve their concentration, they might repeat, I have excellent concentration. I can focus on anything I choose. In this case, a lot of the people listening here, their self talk might be, I'm running a successful therapy practice. I'm easily managing the practice and I'm growing it every day.
Mm.
Now, in the beginning, if a person starts repeating these statements, the unconscious is going to react to the statement. It's going to say things like, no, you're not. You're not successful. And it might trigger memories of all the times they weren't successful. Well, that's a sign of their beliefs. Their unconscious believe that they're not successful. So that's one of their resistance. If, as they're repeating the statement, their mind triggers memories of maybe their parents or their peers and colleagues, there's a good sign that they're sensitive to what others think. So the resistance is worry about what other people are thinking, specifically the people that are showing up. If they get overwhelmed, that's a sign that their unconscious or mind feels that this goal or success that they're trying to achieve, it's going to be very hard and their mind doesn't feel capable of it. So that's another reason resistance can come up for them. Or as they're repeating the statement and they're getting all the different things that they need to be doing to achieve that goal, and there's particular charges with some of those things. For example, marketing, then they know what the resistance is because there's this task that they're avoiding and they're uncomfortable doing it. Or again, if they have feelings of undeserving or I'm not enough, then that's really the cause of their resistance. Or sometimes, or oftentimes actually, if a very extreme situation comes up in their mind where they think about how they might, if they become successful, they might attract a client who's going to be very difficult and they might not know how to handle them. They might not know that, but that very fear could be the very block that's keeping them from moving forward in their practice. And unfortunately, trying to figure out that on our own, we're not going to get to those answers. But by repeating the statement of the outcome we want over and over and paying attention to how our unconscious responds to that statement, we can get a lot of data about what's actually holding us back. And what's the beauty of self talk is if we keep repeating the statements, after a while, a lot of the resistance kind of moves out of our body and those words start to reprogram our unconscious to act out moving in that direction.
Mm.
So the self-talk can help us identify our resistance and actually help us move forward in it. And I like starting with self-talk. There's a lot of ways to move forward with resistance. And when I do one-on-one work, I get into some of the more deeper solutions. But when I'm speaking to one to many and I want to give some things very simple, I start with self-talk. And why self-talk is important is because success isn't done by making big moves or bringing your A game. It's done by showing up consistently. It's doing things over and over. And the more simple something is, the easier it is to do consistently. And so if a person can get into the habit of taking these little actions, but just showing up on a regular basis, they will make far greater progress than if they brought their A game intermittently. I know I spoke a lot. I hope all of that made sense.
Hmm. Definitely. Well, what you're saying, I think folks can probably relate to, which is the brain is use dependent, right? So, first of all, we're protecting ourselves with whatever our beliefs are. And
Yeah,
we may not even be aware that we repeat those to ourselves, like, oh, this is too hard, or I can't do this, or I don't know how to do this, or it's going to attract something I don't want to attract, or something
yeah,
bad is going to happen, or whatever their belief is. It happens so quickly and it's
yeah,
so patterned. And you're saying, okay, so you might have to take it in a bite-sized chunk. The book Atomic Habits has been on the
yeah,
bestseller list for I don't know how many years.
yeah,
It speaks to people, break it down into something small,
yeah,
create a success, right? B.F. Skinner would talk about how we're going to be more likely to do something if we're successful at doing it. How do you
yeah,
create success? I love that. Self-talk, tell yourself what you want to believe, and you start creating those neural pathways by
yeah,
telling yourself that repeatedly over and over again. What fires together wires together. You tell
yeah,
yourself that, we call it manifesting. You
yeah,
make it happen because your brain starts to believe it. It's heard
yeah,
it enough because it's
yeah,
dependent. That makes great sense. I love that. That's a wonderful place to start.
yeah,
Any final thoughts for our listeners? What would you love for them to take away from our
yeah,
conversation today so that they can start dealing with their resistance, not coddling themselves, not being
yeah.
caught in the trap of or the trick of just self-compassion for the sake of progress, like, or in avoiding progress, right? So, what would you like folks to take away?
Yeah, so I usually like to end by helping people understand that wanting doesn't equate to having.
Mhm.
Just because we have a want or a desire or a goal for something doesn't mean we're going to take the necessary steps to actually go after it.
Mm,
And the challenge here is our wanting mechanism can convince us that we will. When it triggers a want, sometimes it releases these really powerful and euphoric feelings like, yes, I can do it. It's going to happen. This time is going to be different. But if they don't work on the resistance, once those feelings fade, they're going to be just as stuck as they were before. And if a person can understand this, they could be more prepared for when things don't go their way or when they hit that brick wall. Because if they don't understand this, it's easy to start taking action and when they hit the brick wall, get completely derailed. But if they know that brick wall is going to be there and it's going to come up from them, it's internal, then they'll be a lot more prepared to move around and work through whatever that comes in their way. So, and again, self talk is really the key to moving forward because what I've learned in trying to push through all sorts of resistance and helping people run through resistance is resistance will always fight with your efforts. It will fight with your efforts until the day you die. And
mhm,
so instead of trying to push through resistance, you want to actually bring down the resistance. And
mhm,
again, there's many ways to do that, but the simplest and I think the most effective is to start with self-talk. Create set of statements that describe the outcome that you want and just repeat that outcome. And in the beginning, pay attention to how your unconscious responds so you can get the data for why your unconscious or why resistance is trying to hold you back. But then continue repeating it until you can start yourself, until you can see yourself actually taking action and making noticeable progress.
I love that. It's simple and easy aren't the same thing. And
Yeah,
this is not something, self-talk is not super complex, but it's also not easy.
it's not easy, no.
Not easy. So it's a wonderful place to begin. So perhaps you can come back at some point, Cam, and help
Yeah,
us dig in a little bit deeper to some of these concepts and talk a little bit more about what some other possibilities might be, other strategies practice owners can use. But I so appreciate you taking time today telling us about how you see resistance, which is
yeah,
very similar to how I see it. So I love that when we're
yeah,
aligned. And I think this is just very practical. It makes a lot of sense. It follows the neuroscience. This is
yeah.
great. So, Kam Knight, coach, international speaker, author, and world traveler. Thank you so much for joining us today. If someone in our audience would like to connect with you, learn more about your services, learn about how to obtain your books, what's the best way to get you?
Sure. So I've got 3 free guides for everyone who made it this far, and they can get it at kamknight.com. The first guide is on improving your mental performance, reading, memory, and focus. The second guide is on the topic of internal resistance. It goes, we didn't get a chance to talk about how our own wants can create challenges.
Mm,
So it goes into our wanting mechanism. It talks about some of the other causes of resistance that we didn't discuss here, as well as other tricks of resistance. And then I also have a guide called Beat Burnout. And when we understand the principles of the mind, we can see why we're getting a lot more overextended these days and how that's leading to burnout and how we can use that information to make sure our brain doesn't push us in that direction. Because a lot of it isn't our decision, our brain is kind of pushing us there. And they can get all those guides on my website at kamknight.com. And if anybody wants to do one on one work with me, I spent the last 20 years traveling to over 100 countries to develop a method that helps where I can take people into their unconscious and we can work on the resistance directly. It's much quicker, it's much more direct. It's not NLP or hypnosis, it's something I've been refining for years now. And it is really an experience to be able to go inside your own unconscious and to do the work there.
mm.
So anyone interested in that can reach out to me at coach@kamknight.com.
Wonderful. And that's Kamknight. So coach with a C, but Cam Knight is Kam. And we'll have all this in the show notes, folks, but
Yeah.
Kamknight. This is fabulous. And I think what you're talking to us about also fits for our client as well. So there's a lot of ways that folks can utilize this information. But Cam Knight, please come back. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for taking time today. I appreciate your time and your wisdom. All of you who have listened, thank you for being here. Always wonderful to have you. If this is your first time, I hope you'll come back. And if it's not your first time, I hope you'll come back. Thanks so much for joining us. Be well.